Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name's Robert Winters.
And I'm Judy Nathans.
And let's see, I think last week we had a little fun looking back at the last couple of years.
Right.
You know, what's gone down around the city of Cambridge, especially at the city council and a little bit on the school committee side of things.
Right.
And I guess our plan this week was to take a little bit of a look ahead. If I had a crystal ball, we'd lay it right out in front here and we would gaze into it.
To see what's going to be handled from the
See
committees?
from where we go from here.
Okay.
You know, it's, of course, a lot of this is guesswork. Nobody really knows, and you never know when a crisis is going to come up or something unforeseen. But certainly, wait a minute.
Oh. Is it being recorded? Yes.
No, it's got a problem, but that's all right. We'll just have to do it the other way then.
Okay.
Anyway, so let's see. Let's see. Today is Tuesday, December 29th. We have the inaugural meeting of the Cambridge City Council coming up on Tuesday, January.
Tuesday? That was Monday.
Monday. Excuse me. Right. That's right. Monday, January 4th, 10 a.m. Where after all the swearing in, raising of hands and all of that hullabaloo, presumably they will then come to the point of electing a mayor.
Oh, so they might do it right then.
That's what they do. It's part of the rules. It's the first order of business.
It's only when there's problems that they don't.
Right, and now there are certainly some years where they'll actually do multiple ballots and then come to a resolution, and there have been other years where they kick the can down the road, and I think Anthony Gluccio wasn't elected mayor until I think February 14th or so.
He was mayor? Wow, I forgot that.
Yeah, back in
back in the day.
98 or something like that.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, and there have been years where I think Mickey the Dude Sullivan, they took over 1,000 ballots before they finally settled on a mayor somewhere towards summer, I think.
My goodness.
Right, it was very late spring. And back in those days, you couldn't even issue things like various licenses until there was a mayor, so there was a lot of pressure being levied on them. There's actually some pretty hysterical Harvard Crimson articles about the great mayoral round. Week after week, it became such a joke. Hopefully it'll all get settled, and we'll just see how it happens. I think also later in the day on Monday, they do the inauguration of the school committee. Which is, I think, takes place at 6 p.m. over at the main library, the main lecture
different
hall.
Location.
Different location. City Council inaugurals at City Hall in the Sullivan Chamber. There's usually a sort of big shindig, some sort of food and whatever, so I'll try and take advantage of that. But I actually have to teach a class at 1 o'clock, so they better make it snappy.
Don't they have jobs, some of them? I guess they take the day off.
Yeah, I think they get a day off for that.
All right.
Definitely. So anyway, that's what's coming up right away. And again, maybe depending on your point of view, maybe it doesn't matter who's mayor in terms of what happens up at the city council level or at the school committee. Maybe it's the mayor is just another member of the 9 or a member of the 7. Sometimes a mayor makes a difference. Oftentimes a mayor is just the person who officiates the meeting. So we'll see.
And they sit on the school committee. Chair.
Yeah, becomes the 7th and voting member of the school committee.
Right.
Has a little bit of influence, I think, just for the power of the person at the rostrum. But fundamentally, it's just one of 7 or one of 9, depending on the body.
They get paid more. They get more assistance, don't they?
The mayor, it used to be that the mayor didn't get an extra stipend for being chair of the school committee, but ever since a little bit of a fiasco back in the 90s, that got resolved by essentially giving the salary of a school committee person is added to the salary of a city's councilor.
No way.
Yeah, that essentially sets the salary of the mayor.
Wow,
It's a combination.
Pretty big.
It is pretty big,
Isn't that bigger than the city manager? Maybe not.
Oh, not even close.
Okay, all right.
Not even close. I think the city councilor makes 70 and change plus benefits, and a school committee member gets about 30-ish.
Oh, more than that. I think it's 38.
I'm not sure. But anyway, I think the mayor gets in the neighborhood of $100 grand. I think. I don't think they do it for the money, by the way. Maybe in terms of pensionable years they do, but
I think in years past they got a $10,000 additional, so maybe that.
Well, there was a time the stipend for a school committee member was in the order of about $10,000. Then they upped it significantly back around 2000 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other business beyond just the selection of a mayor. A lot of focus goes on that because it's sort of, I don't know, we live in a superstar-driven kind of world or something.
Yeah.
But really, the business of the council is largely centered elsewhere. I put together a list of a few things, largely gathered from things that I might think of as unfinished business from the previous city council term, the current city council term, just to kind of see what, where would we expect to go from here. And there are many things. I actually have a list of about 11 different categories here. May as well just sort of start walking through some of them. One perennial topic that never goes away and will likely never go away is just housing.
Right.
Housing as an issue. Once upon a time it was all about rent control, but certainly since 1994 it's been a little more complicated about housing generation, creation of new housing, affordable housing, how much housing, and it's become pretty complicated in recent years. One of the unfinished business items it's actually still in the queue of the city council because it's a zoning petition, something called the Barrett petition, which I'm mentioning only here largely because it's current. And that's one thing, if it were to pass, would involve one aspect of it. It would allow for what are known as accessory units or accessory apartments, sort of within the envelope of existing housing units. So if a person was sort of overhoused, had extra rooms, and wanted to actually rent them out in a legal way, this would be basically create a vehicle for doing so. Many people have argued, including the author of the petition, that this could potentially add hundreds or more of potentially relatively affordable housing units for people who would be willing to live in that kind of an arrangement.
So I'm not clear. I thought, are you saying within an existing apartment to create another apartment, or adding on to a lot?
I mean, the thing is, there are rooming houses. Though actually not so many anymore. There are bed and breakfast type places which essentially function as hotels.
Well, there's Airbnbs. How is it different than how does that come with that?
I would say it's actually potentially related. There are people who will, whether legally, illegally, or I guess it's sort of one of those gray areas which has not yet really been fully regulated as Airbnbs.
Well, you say the word apartments. To me, that means a self-contained unit. So it means it has its own bathroom and kitchen versus a room. Like Airbnb often is in someone's house and you're sharing the kitchen. So
I'm not going to claim
I would like to look at that because I think I thought it meant something a little different.
I think one of the appeals of it, and the reason why I was sort of throwing it is almost sort of verging on a housing policy issue, is that if it does at least have the potential to create housing potentially affordable, but for a lot of people without actually building new buildings. And there's been a lot of controversy in recent years because the city's policy is basically to promote housing growth, especially if it involves affordable housing units alongside. But a lot of people then object to the increase in heights or densities and what have you, and this is sort of one creative way to actually add housing, period, rooms in a way that doesn't actually build anything.
Okay, so one last thing, and maybe we can get an answer from him, is that there is a law in the books that you can't have more than 3 unrelated people in one apartment.
Right, something which is routinely ignored.
Right, and I know that for a fact, and many younger people in their 20s can't afford to live just with 2 other roommates, and maybe so does that, I wonder how that impacts on that.
I don't know. I don't know.
Because it seems to me it would address that.
There certainly are a lot of people who are overhoused, one would argue, who have, in fact, there was actually already a provision for accessory housing units in some parts of the city, sort of better off parts of the city, where people were very much overhoused and wanted to rent out rooms in some fashion. And a provision for this sort of thing was made some years ago. Many years ago now, actually, and this is basically would expand it to some other parts of the housing stock.
Okay, so I'll just
so anyway, it's
find out more about that.
Arguably, maybe a relatively small part of the whole picture, but it is something that is current.
All right.
There's one proposal from last term, the current term, which I think that it may still be in the process of being studied, was something called an affordable housing overlay. Now, I can't say that I fully understand this, or maybe because it was never fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Maybe we're still waiting to get some sort of proposals from Community Development Department about this. But basically, if you sort of took either the whole city or a good chunk of the city and basically created some sort of incentive system where if you want to do something, but you agree to put in some affordable housing units, we will allow you a little extra density or a little extra height or a little extra this or that, and that would then be something that you could, a right that you could exercise as of right without having to go for a special permit. So anyway, that's one thing that was proposed in this current term and not acted on or never followed through.
Proposed by a councilor?
But yeah, it was part of a city council order, and it is certainly possible that that may become a part of discussion in the upcoming term, city council term. There were proposals for building housing exclusively for low and moderate income people on the parking lots in Central Square. It has some merit also, but there's always the question of, do you really want to concentrate, well, I guess middle income is not what I would call poverty. But
yeah, low and middle. In fact, Central Square is not also sort of an up and coming, changing area.
Well, I guess now it is.
Right.
But,
well, yeah, it is now.
Yeah, but the thing is it? There's a public policy question. Is it really right to build something that's exclusively for that, or is it better to integrate people of a whole lots of strata of income?
True, but I think because of where it is, and it's not often some part of Cambridge, it's probably, did you read what Boston did? I mean, they are building 1,400 for the same population near North Station.
Yep, and it involved a tremendous amount of linkage fees because of the way they do it in Boston.
Yep.
Boston is not really as much into inclusionary housing. Basically, if you want to build a luxury housing in a Tony part of downtown Boston, you can do it without including any low-income units. You just pay a big chunk of change into a fund. So they're taking a lot of money out of that fund, and that's what's going into this project.
I thought it was a separate developer that's doing it.
Well, they're using a lot of the funds. It's a separate developer, but the thing is they are using...
But it is unusual. It hasn't happened before, at least of where it's being located.
Yeah, but the thing is...
It's not being ghettoized or anything. It's sort of where people want to live. So,
yeah, and the thing is it's in close proximity to other higher income things.
And I'm just saying Central Square is where people want to live right now.
Yeah, definitely. So
that's interesting.
Many of us believe that the more housing, the better around here.
All right.
There was a proposal for changes in the inclusionary zoning percentages. Currently, it's a 15% inclusionary zoning law that basically says that if you build 15% affordable units in your housing project, we'll give you extra units on top of that, so that the effective percentage ends up being a little bit less than 12% in the end. Some have argued, and certainly when there's been deal making going on, such as in the Mass and Main project or elsewhere, people have bargained for higher percentages, and there are some people who would like to make that the rule. Closer to 20.
Right.
I mean, it does come a point where it starts to become enough of a disincentive that, in fact, it just squelches.
People will walk away.
People will walk away. So I don't think anybody's really figured out what the right balance is just yet. The small item on the housing front, there is one building, this sort of this eternally vacant, seemingly abandoned building called Vale Court in Central Square. Yeah, it's right off Bishop Allen Drive, right where Temple Street butts right into it.
All right.
Yeah. And right, you've got a kitty corner to where the YWCA building is.
Yeah.
And that's just been abandoned for years.
It used to be, and it was like garden apartments. And
I'm bringing it up only because it was the topic of quite a few discussions in city council orders, including one they called for eminent domain taking of that project, of that property.
Who owns it?
Abu Zara is, I believe, the family name, and but they've basically left it abandoned for a couple of decades now, and it's an embarrassment.
So why can't it be taken by public?
It could, but eminent domain taking is a pretty tricky business. And this one apparently is also subject to a bit of a family squabble anyway.
They must be paying their taxes on it then, because I think
you do
that
have to
does
pay the
give you-
taxes.
Right,
Yeah.
because if they didn't, then I think
They
there'd
were
be more
using it-
cause for that.
Yeah, they were
take
using it just as a parking lot and getting some income, but then that was illegal, so that was taken away. So
Wow.
I don't know, maybe it'll force a little bit of action.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest items, not just for this coming term, but maybe carrying over into the term after, is something that was initiated in this current council term under the guise of what's called the master plan.
Right.
Which is now, many people have been calling the citywide plan, and
master
now
plan,
there's a sort of a game going on now about coming up with a name for it. So I think before the week is over, we'll be calling it Envision Cambridge, or something snazzy like that.
Right.
Doesn't much matter, but the thing is that this is something that was initiated, commenced maybe in March or April of 2014. There was a lot of process leading up to it. A consultant was hired, and they're kind of moving along with it. And it brings up a lot of issues, and I just wrote down a few here. I'll mention a few here. One thing that has certainly been happening over the last half a year, actually, as soon as the master plan was put into process, was a phenomenon of where any project that anybody proposed that somebody didn't like, they would suggest, well, how can we proceed with this until we have a master plan? So it has become this sort of ultimate kick the can down the road excuse. Thankfully, projects have actually commenced, and not every can has been kicked down the road, but certainly once we're really into this, I think you're going to hear that more and more and more, people saying, well, we can't make the decision on this, we can't allow this to happen because, don't you know, we're still master planning. So one big question I have is that, in spite of any good intentions or skills of the people who are conducting the process, there's a real question of whether it'll be a cooperative environment or a competitive environment. There are people who are very much taking sides especially on matters of development over the last few years.
Right.
And those people aren't going to go away. Right. And now there'll be this forum of sorts where committees will be formed, and various people will either take sides and fight, or get together and work cooperatively and come up with...
Hopefully it's not an election year this year, so maybe there will be more cooperation.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're dealing with some of the legacy of the last few years, so whether people can get past that. Yeah, and it's not just from the election. I think just people have been taking sides. I mean, there was a lot of battle over the Mass and Main project in Central Square, and that's not, well, they changed some zoning a bit here, but there's no shovels in the ground yet.
There's a lot of groups that are pretty organized over these things
very
too,
much.
and they'll be showing up.
Absolutely. I think you'll probably see play out in the coming couple of years, sort of the argument for those who are in favor of transit-oriented development. And higher density in the vicinity of transit.
A Better Cambridge group was kind of...
Yeah, Better Cambridge was certainly one group that advocated that side of things. I think there are a lot of people currently in the city administration, certainly at the state level. Governor Patrick's administration was very, very much oriented toward transit-oriented development. So there's that point of view, and then there's the point of view which is a little closer to, I guess, what we could say the Cambridge Residents Alliance point of view, which is a little closer to the old Cambridge Citizens for Livable Neighborhoods notion of smaller scale, shorter buildings, not too much density, and arguably that leads to a very tight housing supply and extreme housing costs. But anyway, that'll be part of I think the yin yang of the whole process. You'll definitely see that, I think, playing out. Hopefully it won't just be all about development and density versus no density, but it's inescapable. This will be a big piece of it. One of the things I have some serious concern about is that, and this goes beyond just the master plan, has to do with representativeness. If you go to a city council meeting on any given Monday, there are certain people who come up who are very vocal, very active, and then there are a lot of people who are, busy leading their lives and don't come out. And it would be a shame if this process were to be dominated only by the people who are the usual suspects who want to come out to meetings and whatever. I think the city is pretty aware of this. and they talk about what ways can we invent in order to get a better representation of the full cross-section of the city's population. So it's not just sort of fending off this group of advocates versus some other group of advocates. So I think that's going to be a big piece of the dynamics of it. One early action item listed as part of the master plan or citywide plan was, an early action plan was focused on the Alewife area. I think that was largely a political concession.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the first half year or so of the process. Will there be some significant change to what was called the Concord Avenue or Concord Alewife plan, which actually encouraged housing growth, but then when the housing was actually started getting built quicker than people thought, people said, oh my God, they're building housing there. So will, in fact, they try and slow down or stop housing growth out there? Or what will happen? You know, so that for me, that'll be a bit of a bellwether to see how the discussion proceeds in that, and whether any action or any actual recommendations grow out of the early stages of that. One other part that I think is going to have to make it into all this citywide planning has to do with transportation. You know, you might say, well, what? You know, it's not, are we going to build new roads? What are we going to do? But, you know, arguably, the last 5 or 10 years, the city, you know, it almost seems to me that when people talk about transportation, everybody says, well, we're putting in bike lanes or we're putting in cycle tracks, and as if that's the sole source of transportation. I guess recently there's been a little more funding for some of the participatory budgeting, a little money for a better number one
hubway
bus
stations, and there was some uproar over that in the neighborhood, taking away a parking space.
Absolutely, but it does seem like sort of it's like bicycle as panacea. It seems to have been the kind of the psychology of the last 5 years, and I think if people just take a step back and think about it, even if they love cycling like I do. But if you really think about it in the big picture, that cannot possibly be the whole answer. Right. Especially as people get older and they still need
weather.
motor vehicles. And this is New England. This is not the Netherlands.
If they were biking a day,
they're and you know, if there is traffic congestion, you cannot simply wish it away with a hubway station. You know? So I imagine this will be definitely a big core piece of what happens during the citywide planning process. You know, if it was up to me, I would love to see some brand new ideas about actually building new connections, not just over the railroad tracks at Alewife, but in other places, better connections to Somerville, so we're not all funneled onto 2 or 3 streets to get between places. You know, in my dreamy, you know, world vision view moments, I imagine having another bridge over the Charles River.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it'll happen.
Just pedestrians, or
no, for all vehicles. But the thing is, you know, just to get better interconnectedness around here. We do, I think, at least in my opinion, we suffer from too few connections between cities and within the cities, and it doesn't have to all be auto-centric. But the thing is, I just think we're choked.
Well, that's why the whole Green Line extension debacle is a shame, because that would have solved some of that.
Yeah, I somehow intuitively feel some resolution will happen, because
I think it has to, because there's the pressure. People, you know, bought homes and bought property, and it just, that was a missing link between that part to get to Somerville.
Absolutely, and it affects any citywide planning for Cambridge too, because housing development in Union Square, Somerville becomes an attractive alternative for people seeking housing in the Cambridge area.
In Bedford.
Yeah, it doesn't all have to be in Cambridge, so that is definitely part of the solution. I honestly really wish we had better intercity planning in general.
Regional, you mean?
Yeah, regional,
well,
even if it's just 2 cities. I hope it's part of it. I know that there's been some discussions with some of the urban core cities to do a little bit more cooperation. There was some press releases recently about it.
A lot of things,
Yeah, I think we need a little bit more of that. So maybe we need more of a citywide plan, more of a region-wide plan.
Yeah.
We'll see. We can always hope. I think in the end, when all is said and done, which may not be for another 2 to 3 years. It's going to be very interesting to see whether all the efforts that people put into a citywide plan, whatever comes out as the recommendations, will, if they come out and some of the recommendations are not the ones that the people who initiated this wanted to see come out of it, will they then be very unhappy, you know, take their glove and baseball bat and go home and complain the fix was in, you know, and just, you know, feel like this was all a disappointment. I don't know, you know, I mean, if this is really is a cooperative process, we'll hope for better. But I do fear that this could simply become a question of, well, we came in expecting something, and then maybe in the end it ended up as an endorsement for a lot of the way we do things already, and then people may be upset. So we'll see how it plays out. Anyway, so that's just been on the citywide plan. You know, truth is, I mean, listen, I've got 5 pages of things here, but I have to tell you, that citywide planning process, I think, is going to be a pretty dominant theme over the coming days, to be sure. Just one thing I'll just mention relatively quickly before we move on to the next half hour here. There was one initiative, a big initiative actually, 13 to 15 meetings about STEAM and STEM.
Can you define that again?
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. But really the impetus really was to find ways of connecting local residents, particularly people from low-income backgrounds, to some of the economy that's all around us in Cambridge.
So businesses or corporations.
Something was very important to Dennis Benson, and you know, I hate to see that just end up with just the hiring of some individual and then not a lot of stuff to show for it. So, you know, how that plays out is going to be
was that one of the recommendations, to hire someone to coordinate that effort?
Yeah, but you know what can happen? I've seen it happen before here and in Boston, where you go through a lot of initiative, and in the end, what you end up with is just another job,
just another title,
and nothing to show for it. So, you know, let's hope for better.
Okay.
But you know, I think that'll definitely be something that we'll be seeing here. So, anyway, we're down to our last 8 seconds. So I guess until 3 minutes from now.